figured out their playbook. We've diagnosed the way that they operate and the way that they do things, and we've figured out how to defeat it, I think, especially
Mm.
in the online social media disinformation wars. We've identified who their people are, how they work together as teams to spread false information, fake clips, deceptive clips. Uh, and we're very good at debunking and swarming them, and getting the truth out.
Hello, welcome to Erich McElroy's American Exchange with me, Erich McElroy. That's, I guess, how it works. Thank you for tuning in or joining us for the first time, tuning back or tuning in. Either way, either thing is possible. Very excited this week to bring back Ron Filipkowski. He's been on the podcast a few times. He is the editor of Midas Touch News, or Midas News as it's become. He's the host or on the podcast Uncovered, and he has an incredible Substack which covers everything that's going on in the media that he's been tracking on a daily basis. So if you don't know Ron's work, he's on Twitter, Threads, and lots of other platforms. And we met a few years ago where he was kind of I called him the Twitter warrior because he was prosecuting the case against Trump and right-wing media, really outing them and showing them in their natural environment by just highlighting actual things that they're saying and doing. Well, he's taken that philosophy and brought it into Midas News, and the platform has just grown and grown and grown. And his coverage of different things, we talk about how he covered, he was encouraging people to look at what Trump was saying, look at what's happening in the right, so we can put the spotlight on it and attack it on face value. So he's brilliant. He's a former prosecutor, so he's got a really sharp mind of just drilling down into what exactly is going on in that space. Fascinating conversation as always, and we're brilliant to have him back. So here we go with Ron Filipkowski. And if you're watching this on YouTube, please make sure to like and subscribe. That's the thing you're supposed to say on these things, and enjoy our conversation with Ron. I'm very excited to welcome back to the pod Ron Filipkowski. He's been on the pod a few times now. It's always a pleasure to have him on because I love the way he prosecutes against Trump and his many acolytes. And it's great to have you back. The first thing I was going to ask you about was, are you doing okay? Because you are famously in the past have been in Florida, but you've left. You've left Florida. I was going to make sure you were dry and safe and everything else, but where have you ended up?
Yeah, I'm in Maine, moved out of Florida after 32 years. It was a
Wow.
long run. Just had enough. Kids are growing out of the house,
Yeah.
working for Midas now, so I'm sort of a digital nomad where I could live anywhere for the first time in my life. Because when you have your own law practice, you're stuck to one area. The idea of trying to move and start over as a solo
Mm.
practitioner lawyer is almost impossible. So yeah, the new job sort of freed me up to go where I wanted, and we looked at a lot of different places around the country and settled on Maine.
And you chose a place that I believe is known for not having any natural disasters. Is that I don't even think Maine has earthquakes, do they?
No, well, we got some bad snowstorms here, I guess,
All
but
right,
we'll
snowstorms. Okay.
we'll see how that goes. But I'm actually on the southeast coast where it's supposedly not as bad as northern Maine, so we'll see.
Right. And politically it's a little quieter as well, isn't it, up there?
There, yeah. I mean, yeah, it is. Driving around, it's kind of refreshing because you drive around Florida and you see mostly Trump signs everywhere. And here it's mostly Biden Harris, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
It's a lean Dem state, Democratic
Hmm.
governor, two Democratic representatives, but we also have Snow, who's the Republican congresswoman, senator, sorry,
Right.
who's pretty moderate and can kind of go either way. So yeah, it'll be it's a lot different. It's not as hyper partisan and not as intense as Florida. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, I still am going to ask you about Florida politics in a little bit, just because that's where the action is in these states. But as the idea of this podcast is that I'm dialing across from England to find out the state of play. So I always like to start with that question with my
Sure.
guests: is what do you feel that we're a few weeks away from the actual D-Day, from the vote, all the voting has started. How do you feel right now? What's happening, at this moment?
I think I feel the way we all feel, which is, I mean, on Democrats, which is very anxious and nervous and concerned, because a lot of us feel like this election could go either way. It's a coin toss Because
Mm,
look, if America was a popular vote, we wouldn't be worried because the
yeah.
Republicans can't win a popular vote election. But it's not. We have this peculiar electoral college thing, which basically makes 43 states virtually irrelevant. And whatever they do doesn't really matter. And it all comes down to like 7 states every time, which is, the crazy system. So it's hard to tell, how some of these things are breaking. The other problem is the polling industry is I think largely broken because the old
Mm,
models that they use to poll people, calling people at between 6 and 6:30, at the dinner hour on their home landline and all of that, and getting them to sit with them for 15 minutes to answer questions. There aren't many people who answer those calls anymore. So I
yeah.
think it's harder and harder for pollsters to get accurate results, and there's so many polls out there. So it's really hard to tell. I mean, we're all, of course, very nervous, and the Senate and House, same thing. I think the Senate's going to be 51-49 one way or the other, and the House is
Mm.
going to be within a few seats too. So everything here is really razor thin.
I mean, I sometimes I start again. That's why I started this podcast is because I'm over here and I consume a lot of the media, maybe not quite as much as you do, but I consume a lot of things. And I feel like I was actually feeling kind of good in some ways. Like it just feels like the trend lines are there, and that sense of hope and joy that we got with this refresh with Kamala's campaign. But I guess, and I also don't really trust these polls, as you said. I feel like because they're measuring just a moment in time. I mean, do you think that they still serve a purpose, the polls?
I suppose. I don't talk
Mm,
about them very much. I don't post any polls. You'll never see
yeah.
me post a poll result, positive or negative. I'm just not going to get on that train. I don't trust any of those people. I don't trust the focus group people at all. They're even worse than the
Mm,
pollsters, in my opinion. So, no, I mean, I serve a purpose. Yeah, I mean, I guess they certainly have served a purpose for Trump because I think that there were a lot of really heavy Republican donors, the big money guys, who were on sitting on the sidelines for a long time until they
mm,
saw Trump continuing to poll well in many of these states. And I think that
yeah.
ultimately caused them to come in and back him with their money. Had he not polled where he was polling, I don't think they would have done that. A lot of them would have done that. So they definitely have an impact. I think that they helped to get Biden out of the race. The polls
Yeah.
certainly cratered for him. So they do matter. They do affect outcomes. They affect donations, but I just don't know if they're accurate anymore.
Yeah. I think, I mean, the sense, it it seems like it has to mean something that all of these traditional Republicans and the hardcore, like people like Liz Cheney, are coming out and standing up for a Democrat. I mean, that is a significant shift. You're a former Republican involved in Republican politics for a long time, and you've come a long way, in the last 4+ years. Do you think that there is a quiet bubbling that is real, that is now what they call the quiet Trump voter is now going to be the quiet Kamala voter?
Here's the thing. I think that people make a mistake when they sort of just focus on that because on
Mm,
the number of Republicans like me who have left the party or are crossing over, your Liz Cheney's, your Kinsingers, Lincoln Project guys, there's many of us because we've been offset because there's a realignment of the parties in so many different demographic areas. There's this tectonic shift that Trump has caused in American politics where you're seeing so many of these rural, blue collar, working class people who are largely Democrats 20, 30 years ago are now shifting Republican. And then a lot of the college educated, white collar uh, corporate workers are moving out of the Republican Party into the Democratic Party. The military, always military and vets were Republicans, right?
yeah.
But what we've seen over the last dozen years or so is military recruitment has spiked for women, for
Mm,
minorities, and the number of Democrats that have served in the US military over the last decade has gone way up. So you're going to
mm,
see a lot of Democrats who are military veterans running more and more for office than you used to in the past. So and I don't think I don't think like the military vote is going to be this reliable Republican vote. And in fact, we're seeing that right now where Harris is making a really strong play for these military votes overseas. That used to
Yeah.
be a Republican thing. But now the Democrats are doing it more than the Republicans and going after military absentee ballots. So it's really this big political realignment that's happening. But I also think, and where also Trump is attempting to bring in black male voters as well, and thinks he has a shot of doing that. And Barack Obama directly addressed that issue last night in his speech in Pennsylvania, which I thought was really good.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how people react to that if they feel that it's hectoring. Because, there's somebody was saying, there's another commentator talking about the fact that no one under 30 would have voted for Obama or something like that. Like, time slips away from us, Ron. I don't know how it happens, but that was a long time ago that Obama was president. And so is having this older, we think elder statesman, but this older dude yelling at younger dudes, is that going to just put them off even more?
Well, I think I've heard that argument too, mostly from
Yeah.
Republicans, and I disagree with it. I think that if Obama, I wish Obama had been out there more. I don't know why he
Mm,
really hasn't. I think he's done a lot of fundraising, and I
yeah.
think he's done a lot behind the scenes. But I really wish that he had been out there a little more. Maybe he felt like he didn't want to step on Joe's toes or Biden or Kamala's toes.
Yeah.
Maybe the Harris campaign didn't want him out there too much, taking up the spotlight from a new nominee.
Yeah.
So that could have been part of it too. But I think he's extremely effective. I think the way that he put the argument is really, really effective. Um, to the black male voters that he's speaking to, which is basically what his message is look, Trump's play to you has been since he was arrested. It was that from that point forward that he thought he could get black voters because he
Yeah.
thought his arrest would connect with them because they're all criminals, and the fact that he started selling gold sneakers and he started having these fringe rappers around him
Mm,
endorsing him. And Obama was saying, look at what he's doing. Look at how he's trying to win you over. He's trying to
yeah.
win you over by saying that you're all criminals and thugs and he is too, and that's why you're going to like him now. And what he's saying is that's not who we are. That's not who you are. That's not who you want to be, and that's not what you should admire. And I thought that that was a really effective way of making the case.
Mm. Yeah. I mean, it's almost like he's showing up with a bucket of fried chicken going, you see, I'm one of you
Yeah,
now. It's just like, what are you doing?
that
But
that's
they,
that's
but
basically it. Yeah.
but he does. I mean, well, he was just in Detroit last week, or this week, insulting Detroit to Detroit's face, and saying things about Detroit that are the reputation of Detroit from the 80s when Detroit is, it's coming along, it's getting better. But it doesn't, well, with his supporters, it seems to make no difference. They're impervious. Um, your specialty is deep diving into the right and finding out what's going on there. Are you seeing a gearing up, a shift? Is it kind of just the same level of bullshit and noise that you've always seen, or what? And as we get closer to the election, is there a change in tone?
I think that they're trying to do a lot of the stuff that, well, first of all, they're trying to do a lot of the stuff that they have done in the past, but
Yeah.
we've figured out their playbook. We've diagnosed the way that they operate and the way that they do things, and we figured out how to defeat it. I think, especially
Mm,
in the online social media disinformation wars, we identified who their people are, how they work together as teams to spread false information, fake clips, deceptive clips, uh, and we're very good at debunking and swarming them, and getting the truth out.
yeah.
And a lot of the mainstream media now follows my team of people that does that, and they chime in and join in, whereas they were in 2020 and 2022 even completely oblivious to a lot of this stuff. They had no idea that there was this
Mm,
big right-wing echoes. They had no, I think they kind of had a concept that it was out there, but they didn't know who the players were and how it worked. And it's always amusing to me when I see like CNN or something do a big expose on one of these right-wing influencers, like a Laura Loomer. It's like, yeah, welcome to the party. I've been talking about this person for 3 years, and now
Yeah.
you've just figured out that this person's a problem. So I mean that's a perfect example of what was really funny, because when I always track Trump's plane everywhere it
Mm.
goes. I follow him getting on, while he's on, getting off. I follow all the people around in his orbit, so I get all this footage. And I had Laura Loomer on his plane going to the debate against Harris, and I pointed it out. I was the first one. I said, "Look, there's Laura Loomer helping Trump with his debate prep, maybe, on his plane." And then, that created this huge firestorm, and ultimately caused him to distance himself from her. He hasn't been seen with her since then, and she was a regular presence in his orbit. So that's an example of like things that we can do to expose what they're doing behind the scenes, flush it out into the mainstream, and have the mainstream go, what the hell's going on here? You know?
Yeah. Well, because that's a big shift from when we first met, when it was basically just you doing this, and you had a couple, single moms, I think, helping feed you footage and information. And I know at that point you wanted to expand that, and you have. Tell me how you've done that.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Midas guys reached out to me because I sort of wrote my sort of like, we're dating ourselves here, but Tom Cruise, what's that movie where he had the goldfish and he did his mission statement?
Oh yeah.
Jerry
Oh,
Maguire, right?
Jerry
Jerry
Maguire,
Maguire.
classic. That's
So I
not
had my
dated at
Jerry,
all.
I had my Jerry Maguire moment, because I never really vent my frustrations personal wise on social media, but a couple years ago I did, and I'm like, look, I see the problem, I know the people, and I know how to beat these people, and I have this plan, and it's very detailed, but I'm a full-time practicing lawyer. I don't have
Mm.
time. I can't do it. I'm doing the best I can as like one guy with a couple volunteers. And ultimately, the Midas guys reached out to me and said, look, we have this YouTube platform, podcaster platform, social media platform, but we want to create a news website, and we saw what you wrote about what you want to do. We feel like we can combine the two things, and you can we'll pay them, the researchers that you want, the deep divers that you want, full time, to leave their jobs. You leave your job, and you can do what you want, but we also want you to write for us, and that will pay your salary. And I
Yeah.
said, well, I thought about it, and I thought, let's do it. And so we have this team of 8 people who are just fantastic, brilliant. They
Mm.
work around the clock. We all work literally like 16 hours a day, 7 days a week. We're all fanatical, and we worked great together. And I think our team has just been brilliant at just debunking one lie after another. I'll give you just one example, like Kamala Harris. One of the things that they were doing with her is monkeying with the speed of her clips, and they were slowing it down to try and make
Oh,
it look like she was a drunk, and that they were putting that theme out that she was always drinking and intoxicated,
yes, I've
and
seen
they
that.
would slow down intermittently the speed of her clips to show her slurring her words. And we're not talking about fringe characters. We're talking about people connected with the Trump campaign doing this with millions of followers. And so we noticed it, because we're clip guys. We said there's something wrong with this clip. So we would go back and compare the original clip to what they put out, and we caught them doing that. And
Hmm.
they stopped doing it recently because we kept outing them, showing that they were lying, and they were monkeying with the clips. I mean, of course, they were doing that to Biden forever. They were
Yeah.
constantly editing and doctoring Biden clips to make him look older and more senile. And so that's just one of many examples. I mean, we pointed out that the people wearing auto workers for Trump T-shirts at his recent Michigan rally, none of them were auto workers. None of the union
Yeah.
workers for Trump were actually union people. We did facial recognition on his people at his Harlem Bodega rally to show that none of them were from Harlem. They were members of the New York Young Republicans Club. We pointed out that the random black lady that Trump ran into in Chick-fil-A, who claimed that she loved Trump, actually worked for Charlie Kirk and was a Republican operative. We identified her. These are the kind of things that we're doing. We're just a constant thorn in the side of right-wing disinformation specialists.
It's so dishonest. And is there any equivalent to this happening on the left? Do you see it?
No.
I mean, I mean, I don't know if you're looking for it, but I mean, it's not. I mean, they make funny clips of. Well, we don't need to make funny clips of Trump because he sounds insane.
The
I
closest thing
mean,
on the left is like the satire people
yeah.
who, make up like the fake Trump posts or whatever, and they put out stuff. But I mean, and sometimes they fool people, think it's like
Mm,
legit. But no,
yeah.
as far as I know, I haven't seen anybody like actively in a big way on the left just doctoring clips and editing things and I don't know, maybe they'll accuse me of it, but no,
But
as
you,
far as I know, I mean, I would say the crowd size stuff, that's probably the one area that the left does play a little game, and because they know how much it bothers Trump, where they'll sometimes
mm,
post like empty seat photos, but they're like
yeah.
hours before Trump speaks. Those are a little bit unfair, and I don't engage in that. But I guess they're sort of doing it in jest, almost like knowing
Yeah.
how much it bothers Trump when you mess
Mm,
with his crowd size. But that's probably the only thing that the left does that might be a little bit shady.
yeah, I was going to ask you about the crowd size thing because that's sort of been the narrative in the last week or so that Trump's numbers have crowds actually genuinely have started to go down because he's been
Oh
going
yeah,
to
that's
the
for
same
sure.
cities over and over again, and the whole
Yep.
people leaving early.
Yep.
Do you think that's actually happening?
Oh, we started that too. The leaving early thing. It's
Mm,
funny when Harris brought that up there were so many times when Harris brought something up in the debate that I was just like, that was us. Like literally that started with us. And it was just so great. It was just like there probably was like six things that she mentioned in that debate that no one else had talked about before, like certainly Biden
mm,
hadn't, that we actually started. And the leaving early thing was a big thing for us that we focused on. In fact, I sent people, volunteers, to Trump rallies and specifically told them to
mm,
do that. Stand at the exit and film people leaving, and ask them why they're
nice.
leaving. And so we did that. We sent
Yeah.
people to Trump rallies. We still do that. And it embarrasses the hell out of Trump. He hates it because I mean, you can hear him droning on and on in the background talking about
Yeah.
Hannibal Lecter and sharks and getting electrocuted by boats and all his nonsense stories as these people are streaming out of the rally. So you're absolutely right. There's not the energy. There's not the enthusiasm. He still draws the crowds, but they're not as big. The venues are smaller.
Yeah.
Um, and he claims he's doing this Madison Square Garden the last Saturday before the election rally, and he's doing Coachella this Saturday, which is like these are ego things for him. Coachella and Madison Square Garden is not going to help him in any way. Coachella is a county in California, where they do the famous music festival, but
Mm,
it's a Democratic, largely Spanish speaking, community with a lot
mm,
of gay people, a lot of Jewish people, a lot of Hispanic people. It's not Trump country, and he can't win the state of California. So why is he wasting a critically important
valuable.
Saturday 3 weeks out by doing a rally in Coachella? I think it's because he wants to brag a month from now, a year from now, that he had a bigger crowd than the music festival.
Right.
And it's the same thing, Madison Square Garden. I mean, I think that probably ever since he was a little kid, he dreamed of headlining Madison Square Garden. And now this is probably his last chance to ever do that. If he loses, it certainly will be. And so I
Mm,
think it's all about his ego. But when you think about it, how much does it cost to rent Madison Square Garden out? And it's
yeah.
in New York. He's not going to win New York. So he claims, well, we're going to make a play for New York. And the quick answer to that always is anytime they claim that is to just say, why haven't you spent any money on commercials? Why do you have no organization on the ground? You're not making a play for New York. You always follow the money. Trump isn't spending a nickel in New York except for renting out Madison Square Garden, but it's all about
Yeah.
his ego.
Well, some people, I heard some people saying that maybe because he's exhausted some of the areas in the red states or the swing states that he's been going to, that by going to New York, there are Trump fans there. So this will be their chance to come see him. And so he will pack it out, and he will pack out maybe Coachella because there are Republicans in California. And this will be his chance to have a fresh crowd that haven't heard the same speech and want to hear, and also want to hear his greatest hits. Because some of the Trump fans are just going because they want to hear him live, I'm guessing, do his bit about windmills. like a
Yeah.
a washed up stand up comic.
Yeah. Well, but this isn't a reality TV show, but that's
Yeah.
the problem. The Trump and his campaign treat it that way. Like this is not how normally politics works in terms of what you normally do is you would immerse yourself in these swing states. You would stay there. You would be in
Yeah.
there for a few days. You'd have your surrogates in there for multiple days at a time, hitting this because what you're trying to do, the key is at this point in the campaign, it's all about local coverage, right?
Mm.
CNN's not important. Fox isn't important. Newsmax isn't important. All the people who watch cable news shows already have made up their mind. What you're
Yeah.
trying to reach are those low information voters who don't watch cable news and who don't pay attention to politics. They watch local news shows. So what you're trying to do by going into Pennsylvania and Michigan and these smaller communities is you're trying to get those local newspapers and news stations to cover you. That's the
Mm.
key. But Trump is not doing that, really. What he's doing is he's parachuting in, he's flying in, he gives a speech, and then he flies out.
Yeah.
So he's not immersing himself in these communities, in these swing states. So again, going to Coachella, going to Madison Square Garden, is local news in Pennsylvania or Wisconsin or Arizona going to cover those things? No, they're not.
Mm.
So is he going to raise money by doing them? No, these are costing him money.
Mm.
So it makes no sense to me whatsoever. He's actually like running like someone who's already got this thing locked up and is just trying to expand his lead to win in a landslide. That's the way
Yeah.
he's running his campaign.
Do you think he's drunk his own Kool-Aid?
I think this is like what he wants to do, and no one can tell him anything different. There's nobody in
Yeah.
his campaign that can make him do anything he doesn't want to do. So they can tell him, sir, don't do this. Don't stop insulting women. Stop questioning whether Kamala Harris is black. Stop the Hannibal Lecter stories. They can try, and I think that many of them have tried. I think
Yeah.
many of them did not want him to pick JD Vance as the running mate. But he's at the point now where he has completely stopped listening to anyone, all the experts' advice. He thinks he knows better than they do. He thinks he knows more than they do. And he's just stopped listening to everybody. And this is what he likes to do. This is what he's comfortable doing. So he's like that old sort of band from the 70s and 80s that goes out and plays their greatest hits because that's what the fans want, and those are the only songs that they remember.
Yeah.
That's basically who he is. He's basically right now, like, I don't know, pick a band from the 70s that's still out there touring. REO Speedwagon.
Yeah.
That's basically who Trump is now.
When we go see Billy Joel, we want to hear Piano Man. So
That's it.
that's
That's it. So, and that's the way Trump feels. Trump's like, they want to hear these stories, they love these stories. But the question is, okay, are you trying to entertain your cult or are you trying to win this election?
yeah. Well, I mean, I think that the fact that Kamala Harris is actively encouraging people to watch her opponent's rallies is probably something that has never been done in any political space
And
ever.
and like that was another moment that I felt like I've been saying that for years. Like, cover his rally. I've been so upset because here's what happened. In 16, the media overcovered Trump and ran
Yeah.
him live all the time because he was great ratings.
Yeah.
A lot of people had never heard these crazy stories before, and they were pulling big numbers, and they loved the numbers. They were making
Yeah.
ad dollars. And I think that they all thought, well, he's going to lose. I mean, he's not going to
Yeah.
win. So what do we care? We're making money, we're getting ratings, and then he's going to lose and go away. Then he won. And then they overcorrected, I
Yeah.
think in 20. And they said, okay, well, we're not going to do that anymore. So they sort of ignored all his crazy nonsense. And I think that was a mistake. And so really I saw them doing that again this cycle. And I kept hammering away like, no, you must cover the crazy. You must cover
Yeah.
these wild, crazy stories. And they didn't for the longest time. And some media outlets like New York Times, and they still don't. But
Yeah.
but I at least finally got some of them to focus in on some of his mania and some of these crazy things he's saying. And when Harris said that, I thought, man, that's exactly what I've been saying for the longest time. Watch him now because he has mentally deteriorated. I've watched every Trump speech for years. There's
Yes.
no comparison between Trump now and Trump a year ago, 2 years ago, 4 years ago. He is in rapid mental decline,
Mm.
rapid cognitive decline. That's why I say is if you haven't seen him speak in a couple years, you haven't been paying attention, check him out because he's not the same guy.
Yeah, I mean, well, I mean, it make life comes at us and it happens to us, but also just the craziness that's there. I mean, I saw there was a breakdown. I can't remember where I saw this about as well the coverage of his actual felonies that he's been found to have done versus the coverage that the alleged email scandal got for Hillary Clinton. And,
Mm.
that was everywhere that they hammered Hillary on that and hammered her and hammered her and hammered her. But the mainstream press is barely talking about the fact that he's still got all these trials going on and just kind of go, yeah, he's a felon now. He's a felon. It's like
Yeah, I
he's
think there's
waiting
just so
sentencing.
much.
He's gonna be sentenced at some point soon. And that's just
Yeah,
not part of the conversation at all right now.
no, you're right. And I think maybe they feel like I think that they feel like there's so much scandal, there's
Yeah.
so much dirt, there's so that all they would be doing is talking about that. And they feel like, well, we have an obligation to also cover his policy proposals. So we need to spend time on that too. And here's the thing: his policy proposals are just all like as we know. I mean, he promises Mexico will pay for the wall, an infrastructure
Yeah.
plan, a healthcare plan. He promises the moon to everybody and never delivers, and he's done that his entire life in business as well. So when he makes a policy proposal, like what does he promise right now? He's promised no taxes on overtime pay, no taxes on tips and gratuities, no taxes on social security benefits. Interest will be deducted on your car loans. I mean, tax cuts across the board, cut of the corporate tax. He's promising basically that by next week he's going to have promised that no one in America will have to pay any taxes. He's
Yeah.
just promising everybody everything. So, I mean, are you going to cover that stuff? Like these are serious policy proposals? I mean, because they're not. And so when you ask them, well, what about the deficit? You claim you're going to balance the budget, but no one's going to pay any taxes. How's this going to work? Well, we're just going to put tariffs on Europe and China, and that's going to pay for everything.
Yeah. It's insane. Because yeah, he doesn't believe anything that he says anyway. I mean, yeah, you're right, exactly. In the space that you operate, which has primarily been Twitter, I think, and I don't know if it still is mostly Twitter, with the Elon Musk transition and ruining Twitter, and I mean, how has that impacted you? Well, both the work you're doing personally, and then what do you think of Elon Musk is just going deeper, deeper? Apparently, he's camped himself out in Pennsylvania now.
That is correct. Yeah. So, I mean, we talked about this a year ago, all our team, which is we've got to branch out from Twitter, that because that
Yeah,
was our primary home. We've got to diversify because we cannot assume that this is going to be around forever or the algorithm isn't going to be rigged against us or we're not going to get banned. So yeah, because we don't trust Elon Musk at all. I've watched the evolution of him politically.
mm,
I think he was always more right than he claimed. Um,
yeah,
but to watch him get sucked into the right wing ecosystem as so many others have, and just become a Trump cultist, really. Just
yeah,
little by little, I watched him incrementally engaging with some of the more. When I first started to get worried was about a year ago when he really started engaging with the far right fringy people and promoting their account. And I'm like, these are crazy people.
yeah,
They're hardcore right wing, anti-Semitic, religious fanatics. They're a whole kaleidoscope of basically fringy QAnon type people, and he's engaging with and promoting their accounts. And they gained lots of followers because of his engagement with them. And then monetizing Twitter to help them make money off their posts,
yeah.
to finance them. And so, when I saw him doing that, that's when I really became alarmed. And now he's gone from like, I think being like QAnon curious, where he's like dipping his toe in the right wing ecosystem, to now he's the leader of it. He's
Yeah.
gone from like being curious about it and kind of engaging with it somewhat to now he's running the show. He's the ringleader. And it's very frightening, the fact that someone who's in charge of like the digital town square for news in America
Yeah.
is a hardcore far right ideologue now. And there's no other way to characterize it. And
Mm-mm.
I just don't understand why anyone on the left would buy a Tesla right now,
Yeah.
or do any business with him in any way, because you're financing your own destruction, you know.
Yeah. But he's got his hands in so many pies with the government and the government contracts and the space program, and but you would I think it has to impact sales. I mean, I would.
Well, his biggest business partners are the United States government, the Chinese Communist Party, and the Saudi royal family. Those are his biggest business partners. If that doesn't concern anybody, I don't know what will. I mean, people don't focus enough on his ties to China. I, I think
Yeah.
something like half of his income comes from China. But what China is doing is they are in the process of pushing him out. In other words,
Mm.
they've gotten all the technology that they want from him, that he shared with them, and
Yeah.
they're starting to make basically their own version of Tesla. And I predict, in 5-6 years, Musk will be pushed out of China by the Chinese government. But right now, he thinks that they are his friends.
Yeah. I mean, well, just looking at the way he's bounced around at that speech and his dark mega, and then saying that there won't be an election anymore. His closing statement that if you don't vote for Trump, there'll be no more elections. I mean, that's insane.
Yeah. And, he explains that by saying what he's talking about is that, Democrats are intentionally importing migrants
Yeah.
who they're going to give citizenship to. And then they're all going to be Democrats, and that's going to overwhelm the current Republican Party. And this is a master plan on the part of Democrats. Like they can predict how they're going to vote in the future. And keep in mind, though, I mean, there's so many things that disprove this, but the Biden administration has deported like 4 times more people than the Trump administration. So if that's the plan, that you want to import all these migrants to be Democrats, why are you deporting them at such a huge, a massive rate? You know.
Um, there's so many things I want to ask you about, but we've got to watch our time. So I'm gonna jump into a couple of things about your former home state with Florida, because it is important still. I mean, with the abortion initiative that's on the ballot, I mean, is there a chance that we could see a Florida surprise? That there'll be enough that
It's
people maybe will, because I don't know, the polls are saying that measure is likely to succeed to protect abortion rights, or I don't even know the latest on that.
Well, there's two. Those are the only things that give Democrats any hope in Florida, is the abortion amendment that's on the ballot and the marijuana legalization, which is
Uh,
also.
okay.
Florida has the highest number of medical marijuana cards in the country of any state by far. So Florida has I think the last numbers I saw were like 830,000 people in Florida have medical marijuana cards, which is like 4% of the population have
Right.
medical marijuana cards. And that means you have to see a doctor, you have to pay fees. It's very expensive to get a medical marijuana. And yet 830,000 Floridians. And by the way, I can tell you, like, at these marijuana dispensaries, they aren't like potheads. You go there and you see
Mm.
like seniors in there and stuff.
Yeah,
These
yeah,
these are not, typical traditional people that you would think of. So that's on the ballot too, to do away with all that, to where you don't have to jump through all those hoops. Anybody can just
yeah.
get marijuana. So I think those two amendments are going to bring out a lot of people who have never voted before, who don't care about
Mm.
politics. And I think the hope among Democrats is going to bring in a lot of left-leaning people to vote
Yeah.
for those amendments, who, while they're in there, hopefully they'll also, vote for their candidates. Um, that said, though, I'm not overly optimistic. Do I think Harris is going to win Florida? No. Again, follow the money. She's not really spending money or time in Florida. Uh, do I think Rick Scott is going to lose to Debbie Muckersell Powell? That could happen. That's very close.
Mm.
Rick Scott is not that popular in Florida. Um, Less popular than DeSantis, certainly, or even Marco Rubio. Of those three
Yeah.
statewide politicians, he's probably the least popular. So that's going to be a close race, but I think he probably wins. I think the most that Democrats are really hoping to get out of Florida is to flip the Luna seat. The Anna Paulina Luna is one of the most obnoxious, noxious, far right members of Congress. Her district was just hit by the hurricane,
Hmm.
and she voted against funding disaster relief earlier this year. So she's
Right.
since reversed course on that this week, and
Oh,
now
really? I
suddenly
wonder. What a
wants to fully
surprise.
fund FEMA. But she voted against it earlier this year, and so I think that a lot of Democrats are hoping that if they can accomplish at least one thing this election cycle in
Hmm.
Florida, it would be to defeat her.
A couple of House seats, but not Rick
Yeah,
Scott in the Senate. Ugh, he's such a
yeah.
tool.
Rick Scott's a long shot, but the reality is, I mean, here's what the Senate is going to come down to. Senate's right now is going to come down to the Montana seat by Tester and
Hmm.
against this guy named Shee, and Tester's not doing well. And Tester,
Yeah.
if he loses, that basically is what's going to flip the Senate, unless Rick Scott or Ted Cruz is upset, and it's a
Yeah.
little bit of a long shot.
But what about, is it Nebraska where there's an independent running? I think
Yeah, that's another one that could bail out the Senate for. But the
yeah.
other thing you have to realize is there are two senators. Um, the main senator we've already talked about, and Lisa Murkowski, who go back and forth. They
Yeah.
don't they don't vote with the Republicans all the time. So even if it goes 51-49, that doesn't mean Susan Collins. I said Snow earlier. It was Susan Collins. That doesn't mean that Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski are going to vote with the Republicans all the time.
Yeah. But Susan Collins voted for, Brett Kavanaugh and had promises for him that he was going to protect abortion rights.
But
So
but but she's up for reelection in 2 years in a Democratic state.
yeah.
So that's a factor here.
Yeah. I mean, but yeah, so that, I mean, but still the first, if if we can't get this, I mean, if Kamala comes across the line and the House, I think, have some faith there that that could go back to the Democrats. Then but if we don't have the Senate, then they could just stop appointing judges and stop
Yep.
Supreme Court justices.
Mitch
And
McConnell stepping down from leadership. So I think it really depends on who becomes the majority leader if they win. If it's John Thune, which is Mitch McConnell's right hand man from
mm,
North Dakota, very moderate establishment guy, then I think he'll work with Democrats and things will get done. If it's Rick Scott, who's the other, who's basically the MAGA candidate to be Senate
yeah,
majority leader, then yeah,
that's it.
then everything's going to grind to a halt.
I try and end these things on a positive note. I don't know if I've done that now.
It's hard to
Um,
do when you bring me on.
all right. Well, I want to hear about your podcast and your Substack in a second. But before we'll finish on that. But before we do that, I mean, what's your gut tell you? What do you think?
Gut tells me I think Harris wins. I mean, I think it's going to be really, really close. I don't think that the Democrats say, "Oh no, we're going to win this easily." I'm like, I don't agree with that. I think it's going to
Yeah,
be super close. I think it's going to come down to 4 states, and Kamala's got to win 2. I think what it's going to come down to is I think she wins Wisconsin and Michigan,
mm,
and that means it's all going to come down to Pennsylvania,
yeah,
Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada, and possibly North Carolina could be in there in the mix.
yeah,
Kamala has to win 2 out of those 5. If we put North Carolina, she's got to win 2 out of the 5. So I think what she's hoping to do, they're all super close. They're all super close. It's hard to say. Most people think it's all going to come down to Pennsylvania. That
yeah,
Kamala's going to win one of those 5 that we just talked about, and then it's all going to come down to Pennsylvania. And I think that we're seeing that. That's why Josh Shapiro's on the campaign trail, the governor,
yep,
Barack Obama's in there. Um, John Fetterman is the senator, is hitting all the rural Pennsylvania districts where he's very popular.
yeah,
So, but also you see the Republicans doing that too. Vance is spending a lot of time there. So is Trump, and so is
yeah,
Musk and other Republican people. So they have a lot of their ground game team. They don't have as big a ground game operation as Democrats do, but what they do have has been plugged into Pennsylvania.
yeah,
So Arizona is the could upset the apple cart because Trump is absolutely in Georgia. Trump is absolutely banking on those two states. Like he feels like
Mm,
he absolutely has to win. He's probably right. If he loses Arizona or
yeah,
Georgia, it's probably over for him. Um, I think he's going to win Georgia. I really do because of
yeah.
Kemp. If Brian Kemp,
The
who they've
governor.
been
Yeah,
estranged and they've been enemies for 3 years and haven't spoken to each other at all, but they just mended fences a month ago. And I think if Kemp had not done that and had kept his political organization in Georgia out of this, Trump was going to lose Georgia. But Kemp has decided that he wants to be president in the future, and
yeah,
he needs to get on Team Trump in order to do that.
yeah. And I don't think it will help. I think the legacy of this is going to be more what Liz Cheney has said, that, you will be tarred with this brush and it will not be a
Yep.
stench that goes away.
Nikki Haley too. Yep. They
Yeah,
all will be.
all of them,
They won't
all of
be
them.
able to wash the stink of Trump off them ever. I don't think. So I agree. But I think Harris pulls this out. I hope so.
Okay, so we'll finish. I want to hear about your projects you got going on. I mean, you're doing a podcast now, as I'm sure you were inspired by this, by our conversations. I'm sure that was the, oh,
Absolutely.
Eric is doing a podcast. I want to do a podcast. So tell me about your
No,
podcast,
I
and also
said
tell me.
if Eric can do it, then anybody can do it.
That is that is very true, Ron. You've hit the nail on the head. Your perceptiveness is good and painful at the same time. Um, Tell me about the pod and also your new Substack.
Yeah. So the podcast I do with a Brit, Anthony Davis, who is from London and was a broadcaster over there for a long, long time, and he lives in LA now. And I was a guest on his show, is what happened,
Mm-hmm.
and I think we had really great chemistry. He's a pro broadcaster. I'm not, so I think I provide original content and he provides the professionalism and the segues and really good at setting me up. So, and what we decided to do is we called it Uncovered because we want to uncover the stories that are happening in the Republican Party on the right that the mainstream media is ignoring. Things that I'm reporting on throughout the week and on social media, we're uncovering those and bringing them out on the podcast. And we average probably close to 300,000 views per episode. We do one a
That's
week
great.
live on Wednesday. So it's really taken off. We started out, we had about 100,000, now we're up right around 300,000 a show, which is great. It's done well.
That's brilliant.
Substack, my column. Yeah. Of course we have the website midasnews.com that I run with my team of writers. But the Substack thing I just started is the thing I'm most excited about, which is I just started it a week ago, which is a daily recap of the day in politics in sort of a bullet point format where I'm covering, news, notes, and gossip. It's sort of a political gossip columnist, but also information
Mm-hmm.
that I'm pulling out so much stuff that it's almost impossible to get that level of detail and volume from any other source that's out there. In other words, there are other columns that cover politics, but that do that, but they're covering one specific area like Congress.
Mm-hmm.
I'm covering the whole country, all the elections and media as well. And so I really think that this is going to be really big and really good because I write it all throughout the day. I literally spend like
Yep.
12 hours writing this column all throughout the day. I'm adding to it and then publishing it usually 7 o'clock at night Eastern.
Okay. So you're just, yeah, taking all the things you're already doing and just putting it in one place.
That's
Brilliant.
it. In like a bullet point format where somebody can sit down in 20 minutes and literally at the end of that 20 minutes after reading that, they'll know basically everything important and consequential going on in politics all over the country.
That's what we
That's the
like.
goal.
So what's the name of the Substack?
Well, it's just under the
It's under the
Midas
Midas one.
touch.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yep.
under that you'll find my column, and it's just basically called Ron's recap of today in politics.
Nice. Nice branding. Well, thank you as always for coming on. It's always incredible to see, well, what's going on, but also then how this has expanded and changed over the years that we've been chatting. So thanks so much as always.
Yeah, you got it. You're right. It sure has. We'll see what next time we do what I'm doing. Maybe I'm running for Senate or something. No, that won't happen. But
Susan Collins seat, 2 years. There we
hopefully,
go. You
well, we'll be
announced right here,
celebrating.
right here on the pod.
No, we'll hopefully we'll be celebrating a Kamala Harris presidency. Maybe we can come back on when Trump goes to prison. How about that?
That is a date that we will definitely keep. Thanks, Ron.
Okay.
Well, there you have it. Ron Filipkowski, always brilliant. He's so direct and driven and focused and just drilling into exactly what the right is doing. I can't wait to subscribe to his Substack, which he just launched, which is going to have that summary of everything going on. Um, his podcast is brilliant as well, and all of the things that he does if you're following him on Twitter, whilst it still exists, and on Threads. So it's great to have him back. It was nice to end on that positive note and that his sense of things is that Kamala will win. That's what we have to hope. And if you are an American, please make sure you voted. Even if you don't think I'm not in a swing state, it doesn't matter. We need to get as many points up on that scoreboard as possible. It does make a difference. So thanks again to Ron for taking the time. Thanks to Mark, the producer, as always, for putting things together. Make sure to like, subscribe, whatever it is, on whatever platform you're listening to us on, to increase in the engagement and the downloads and the listens. But if you're enjoying this, please share it because I'm enjoying it and we have some incredible guests on and we want that to continue. So thanks again to Ron. Thanks to you, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.